Welcome to this video on automating maintenance tasks with Digital Advisor from ActiveIQ and using Ansible playbooks. The agenda is pretty simple. I'm going to do a quick overview of Digital Advisor, go over the Ansible requirements, and then on to the demonstration. So let's talk about how to use ActiveIQ Digital Advisor and download those Ansible playbooks. Simply stated, NetApp ActiveIQ is a digital advisor that makes it easy to achieve optimal storage health. ActiveIQ uses advanced AI and ML techniques to uncover opportunities to proactively protect and optimize NetApp storage, then provides the insights and actions to make it happen. We call this actionable intelligence, and it leads to higher availability, improved security, and simplified administration. But enough about ActiveIQ. Let's talk about generating and running custom Ansible playbooks. If you need a full overview of ActiveIQ Digital Advisor, please watch one of the other videos on ActiveIQ Digital Advisor or take the official NetApp training class. The Ansible playbooks are found in the Wellness widget. You find them when the remediation is some sort of firmware update. ActiveIQ currently supports Ansible playbooks for disk, shelf, SP, or BMC firmware updates. AIOps is the application of advanced analytics, machine learning, and other AI protocols to equip IT organizations with insights, guidance, and actions that simplify the automation and identification and resolution of operational tasks across increasingly complex hybrid and multi-cloud environments. ActiveIQ has used AIOps to automate problem resolution for years and done so at an industry-leading scale. Each year, tens of thousands of hardware failures are predicted and proactively replaced before a disruption occurs and without our customers logging a support ticket. Potential problems are identified and resolved without our customers ever interacting with support. And now we're automating firmware updates on ONTAP systems. When a risk can be mitigated by a firmware update, the Ansible A icon lights up in the web interface. This alerts you that there's an Ansible playbook that you can run to automatically update the system's drive, shelf, SP, or BMC firmware update to resolve that risk. The playbooks are completely customized for that system or multiple systems and the hardware items that need to be updated. Click on the A to download the firmware files, any other needed files like disqualification files, and a zip file with 2 playbooks in it, a firmware updater and an inventory list. Now let's look at the requirements for setting up Ansible. Most enterprises probably already have Ansible set up. If so, just install the 2 NetApp published libraries, netapp-lib and netapp.ontap. If you need to set up Ansible, you can either install our Docker image. Our Docker image has everything you need. You don't need to do anything else. Or you could just install Ansible. It runs on Linux, Unix, or Mac OS, and then install those previously mentioned 2 NetApp libraries. You will also need a local web server to put the firmware image and disqualification files on. When you run the playbooks, they will ask for the URL to that image. Running the firmware updates is as easy as going into the directory with the playbook and running Ansible-playbook and then the playbook name. The script will prompt for an admin user, an admin password, and the URL to the firmware files. No downtime is needed for firmware updates in ONTAP. Please note that for safety reasons, the script pauses for a long time between certain firmware loads to make sure that the previous operation has successfully completed. To speed up the process, you can actually check on the CLI if the firmware update is already complete and manually move the script forward by hitting Control-C and then a capital C to continue if you want. This is a standard Ansible script process. Let's go to the demonstration. I'm going to demonstrate the BMC firmware update process. I have downloaded the Ansible playbooks to this system from ActiveIQ's Wellness widget. I have already put the firmware files on a local web server. The playbooks themselves come in a zip file. I will unzip it now. The playbook file and an inventory file in the .yml format were extracted into a subdirectory. I will change to that subdirectory, then show you the files. Now it's time to run the playbook. I run the command Ansible-playbook space playbook name file. It asks me for an ONTAP admin user, which is usually admin. It asks me for the admin password. Then it asks for the URL to the directory where the firmware files are in. Please include the / as noted on the screen. The script is now running. It checks that it can log in and has permissions. It starts downloading the firmware files. Once those downloads are complete, it starts loading the firmware on the first host. In this case, in another window, I was checking for the firmware update to be done. And when it was done, I hit Control-C and then another C to continue the Ansible script. I simply did this to save time, and you can do the same thing. Once the firmware update has been done, there's no need to wait any longer. The amount of time these Ansible scripts wait are just in for the worst case scenario of how long it could possibly take. Please only do that if you are sure the firmware update is complete, as documented in the guide linked in the place you downloaded the Ansible scripts in ActiveIQ. Now, there's a short pause before the firmware process can start on the other node. Now the firmware update continues on the other node. At the end of this process, there's some error checking and another reset. But otherwise, the process is now complete and the BMC firmware has been updated to the latest version, resolving some risks for these two nodes.